Tanse, good evening. I'm Nisichawayasihk Cree. Welcome to APTN National News. The Nisichawayasihk Cree Nation in northern Manitoba is calling on the province to put an end to a 12-year agreement on Manitoba Métis harvesting rights. The First Nation says the Métis have no claim to hunting rights on their traditional territory. Reporter Sierra Bettens has more.
The limits of Métis harvesting rights are being tested and called into question by a First Nation in northern Manitoba. In a letter dated August 2nd, obtained by the Winnipeg Free Press, the Nisichawayasihk Cree Nation asked the province to terminate a 2012 harvesting agreement between the provincial government and the Manitoba Métis Federation. The First Nation argues Métis cannot exercise their harvesting rights on NCN's traditional land they say overlaps with the MMF's harvesting zone. The community, located over 800 kilometers from Winnipeg, is currently under partial evacuation due to wildfires. NCN Chief Angela Levasseur did not respond to APTN's interview request by airtime. Will Gooden, the MMF's Minister of Housing and Property Management, disagreed with the letter.
Each other, and it's kind of sad that this has happened at this point when we need to be working together to show how Indigenous peoples, which includes Métis, that we are conservation minded, that we do want to protect the future.
The 2012 application, referenced in the letter, establishes the zones where Red River Métis can exercise their harvesting rights in Manitoba. However, NCN says they weren't consulted before the agreement was put into force in 2012. The First Nation claims there is no historic Métis community at Nelson House in a manner that is consistent with the Powley test. The Supreme Court case that informs the test is often used to determine the application of Métis rights. Gooden, however, questions the letter's interpretation of the test and definition of a community.
Community is a word that's can be used in many different ways. Was there a Métis community in that area? Absolutely. Was there Métis, Red River Métis, who used the area to harvest? 100%. But at the end of the day, I think what we're going to be getting at is how there's not a hierarchy of rights in the Constitution.
In a written statement to APTN, Jamie Moses, Minister of Economic Development, Trades and Natural Resources, said they are open to meeting with the NCN and the MMF and are looking at ways to address their concerns. Gooden says the MMF hopes to sit down with NCN and the province to chart a way forward. As of Monday, Chief Levasseur told the Winnipeg Free Press she'd not heard back from the province. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Métis Nation Saskatchewan is calling on the provincial and federal governments to stop the Fission Uranium Corp PLS uranium mine from going forward. The mine is proposed for Patterson Lake, located almost 200 kilometers north of La Loche. The lake is significant to Métis for hunting, fishing, and trapping. MNS said in a press release that mineral exploration has already damaged the area, with Métis commercial fishing completely wiped out in Patterson Lake. Regional Director of MNS Northern Region 2, Leonard Montgrand, says they offered to collaborate with Fission, but the company rejected all efforts. MNS recently found out that the provincial government has approved an exploration program for Fission, which will use heavy machinery, have 100 drill holes made in the Patterson Lake, and create 45 kilometers of trail. Vice President Michelle Leclerc says if Métis rights under Section 35 are to be valued, governments must be willing to reject projects that harm Métis people. In a statement to APTN News, the CEO of Fission Uranium said their approach to the project includes a strong focus on environmental stewardship and building mutually beneficial relationships with Métis and First Nations. The statement says the company has had ongoing engagement and executed numerous agreements with Métis and First Nations through the course of several years and remain willing to engage with MNS to understand their concerns and seek solutions. The Prince Albert Grand Council and Peter Ballantine Cree Nation are calling for immediate action and accountability after a wildfire caused a full evacuation of Sandy Bay. Chief Peter Beattie emphasized that the fire situation has been under close surveillance, and while earlier containment could have prevented the current crisis, the situation is now demanding a full evacuation of Sandy Bay community, which has a population of roughly 1,800 people. Chief Beattie is pushing for the immediate recruitment of hundreds of First Nation firefighters who have already been trained. The chief says the SPSA refused to hire First Nation firefighters, claiming it's too dangerous because they don't have the proper personal protective equipment. The chief says refusing to deploy qualified First Nation firefighters is not only a serious oversight, but a dangerous excuse that endangers lives and communities. Mi'kmaq chiefs in Nova Scotia met with Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services, Jenica Atwin, and Senator Aaron Prosper in Millbrook First Nation, just north of Halifax today. They announced a funding agreement of $2.4 million over 5 years to the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. The money will help support 8 emergency coordinators in 8 communities. They will assess the needs of each community to prepare and respond to emergency events such as wildfires, hurricanes, floods, and snowstorms, which is becoming more and more frequent. One chief said each community needs a full team for emergency response in case they are isolated, such as what happened during the COVID lockdowns. But Chief Bob Glode of the Millbrook First Nation said this is a start of what's needed.
And that's what we need to be able to continue to do, is build that capacity, build that training, build that knowledge of what is needed in our communities, because each natural disasters that's been happening several times a year does have a significant impact, and it's a cleanup and restoration, and that needs to be able to is ongoing, and that working relationship.
A new Statistics Canada report looks at the well-being of Indigenous children in this country and how they stack up against other ethnicities. Using data from the 2022 Indigenous Peoples Survey, the report focuses on children aged 1 to 14 years old who are First Nation, living off reserve, Metis, or Inuit. Our Sav Jonza brings us this brief report.
It found that 69% of Indigenous children have excellent or very good mental health as reported by their parents. For non-Indigenous children, that number is 86% according to a Canadian health survey from 2019. Almost a third of parents of Indigenous children reported insufficient household income to cover household needs like housing and food. The number is highest among Inuit at 43% and 27% of Métis and 23% of First Nations living off reserve. Food insecurity affected more than 2/5 of Indigenous children, with 14% missing meals or going without food. Inuit children were the most food insecure. Food insecurity affects less than 1/5 of non-Indigenous children, according to the data. Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A Northern Ontario Indigenous community is putting out an urgent call to the federal government to cover a $20 million shortfall in its campaign to build a new elders' home. The current home in Wickwamcong unceded territory was built in 1972, and officials there say the structure is no longer viable. The community is concerned that if a new facility cannot be built, elders will be forced to relocate to other facilities across Ontario away from their homes. A grassroots fundraising campaign has managed to raise more than $2 million, while calls continue for a meeting with the federal government. A spokesperson for Indigenous Services Canada states that the department is working with Wickwamcong and the Ontario government to explore funding options. Meantime, Ontario is extending the home's current operating license while the community continues to seek funding.
We are attempting to secure a meeting with the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada. We've been trying for the last 6-8 weeks to secure this meeting. It hasn't happened yet. We're even going as far as reaching out to the Prime Minister's office as well, because this is a crisis. This is a critical area for the elders of our community and neighboring communities. And it's a crisis that needs to be solved, and we're really calling on the federal government to support us.
Residents in Western Manitoba are protesting after their only lifeline to their community continues to be impacted and disrupted. We'll tell you about that story coming up in about 3 minutes after these messages. Welcome back. A Puckatawagan man is speaking out after he and his wife and nephew walked 100 kilometers to get home. John Colomb and his family walked in the blistering heat for 2.5 days after their train ride home was cancelled at the last minute. And it's not the only time this happened, says the leadership of the Matthias-Colomb Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. They're calling for the immediate improvement in customer service and more empathy from 3 of the northern Manitoba railroad companies. For more, we're joined by John Colomb. Thank you for joining us, John. Can you tell us what led up to you deciding that you would just walk home?
I'd say it was brought on by the number of times that our train has been canceled in the past 4 or 5 years. It's been progressing to where it's becoming normal, maybe not to have a train every 2 weeks. They cancel one, and in that one day cancel, everything gets thrown out of, the wheel doesn't turn properly, like our construction that's happening at the school, our water treatment plant, our lift station, everything that's being built in our community, it gets affected. Not only that, children go hungry. There's families here that depend on that train. They have their groceries shipped to them through that train. All our essential supplies that we need to keep ourselves alive during our life. When we get up in the morning, everything that has to do with living comes on that train. So in my mind, I thought to myself, hey, why are we just sitting back? Why are we letting this become a normal activity? Why is it such it's so easy for them to say, well, we're going to cancel the train on you today without any recourse, without any thought for the community itself, for the well-being of the community. They just sweep that aside and say, well, that's okay, it's only puck. You know, it's that mindset that told me, well, here, John, you need to do something. Somebody's got to get up and say something. Somebody's got to try and show something to the outside world to see exactly how the railway company that operates our train treats our community. Like we're nothing, like that dust bunny under the couch that builds there and forgotten about. Nobody sweeps it. And
yeah, no, such a huge disservice and such an important lifeline for you and everybody else there. What was that journey like? It's been very hot these past days. There's been fires up around that way.
Oh yeah. It was such a roller coaster ride in our mind. It was 1 minute we'd be way up here saying, okay, we can do this. 15 minutes later, we're suffering. Our feet are hurting. The heat is beating down on us. We're trying to keep hydrated using beaver pond water just to cool ourselves off. At one point during the second day, we ran out of water for about 4.5 hours or something like that. And my wife was dehydrating. My nephew was the first one to start throwing up. He started saying, I got a headache, I feel sick. And not long after that, my wife started feeling sick as well. And then I started feeling sick. I threw up in front of them. And I encouraged them, don't give up. Let's keep moving. If we sit here, this is where we're going to perish here if we don't keep moving. Let's find a cool spot to sit. The railroad crew is about 7-8 miles ahead of us here. Let's try and cover as much space to get to them, I told them. So yeah. That was the hardest part of the trip, was when we ran out of water.
Wow.
When we had the supplies, when we had our water, when we had our food, you know, we no problem. The only thing that was bothering us was the heat. This is like walking in the desert, you know, it was very hot. Some of the videos I took, you could actually see the heat rising off up the tracks. Yeah. You could just see it. You could just see it.
No, I believe it. Nisichawayasihk Cree Nation Chief Gordy Bear laid out some of the concerns in a recent press release, including a lack of support for vulnerable passengers, a dismissive attitude to complaints are among them. What are some of your concerns with rail service in the area? You talked about it there. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I guess the other thing I'd like to add is the rail service going up north towards Lynn Lake is non-existent this year because of construction happening by Manitoba Hydro. They're fixing their dam or something. So they're not allowing my family and a few other families that access that side of our country to use the track. They're telling us that we can't be traveling on there because they're hauling stuff. And that to me is a direct attack on my rights as a First Nation person to be able to access my traditional lands, to do my harvesting, my medicine harvesting, my hunting, my berry picking, everything that a native, you know, does. You know, we're not allowed to do that because of the construction, because of HBR hauling equipment for Manitoba Hydro. We're totally cut off.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to leave it there, John. We wish you all the best on your journey there, and thank you for chatting with us today.
Okay, can I say something? I'd like to thank the ladies that came out to meet us. The ladies, their names are Sandra Hart, Margaret Linklater, and Sunshine Moore. They made that trek 15 miles out of the community here, pulling 50, 80-pound wagons with their supplies just to try and come and, to encourage us, to keep us going. They also walked home into the community with us. And also my brother Roy Colomb and Leonard Hart for coming out there with quads to bring us supplies such as water, food, tent, blankets. They were, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have made our journey. And I want to make special mention to my nephew. They called him 18-year-old nephew. His name is Wawa Diu Colomb. Good job, my nephew.
A Native American professional golfer is in Alberta sharing some of his tips and tricks for Indigenous youth. That story when we're back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo comes from regular contributor Dave Menzies. Dave was quick to capture this picture of a hawk moth on his wife's flowers out in Steinbach, Manitoba. Great shot, Dave. Thank you for the pic. How are you enjoying your summer? Don't be shy. Share your pictures with us to be featured as our next photo of the day. Email them to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Over on the East Coast, St. John's 20, Fredericton 24. Inujuak 20, the Grand River 31. St. Jovite 29, Saguenay 26. Toronto 28, Sarnia 26. Elliott Lake 27, Big Trout Lake 26. God's Lake 27, Puckatawagan 24. 26 in Dauphin, Princess Harbor 24. Swift Current 29, Yorkton 28. Stony Rapids 25, Meadow Lake 27. Grand Prairie 26, Fort McMurray 26 as well. Lethbridge 28, Edmonton 26. Tofino 17, Kamloops 32. Dees Lake 19, Sandspit 18. Beaver Creek 21, Dawson 23. 15 in Yellowknife, Norman Wells 24. Inuvik 22, Colville Lake 20. Baker Lake 17, Chesterfield 11. And the Iqaluit 14 and Igloolik 8. Native American professional golfer Noah Begay III admits he has had to go through a lot in life to get to where he is today. Begay put on a golf clinic this week for Indigenous youth in Canyon Meadows Golf and Country Club in Calgary. His message to them is never give up on your dreams. Here's CTV's Glenn Campbell with more.
Noah Begay III is one of the few Native Americans to play on the PGA Tour, but the journey wasn't always easy for the now 51-year-old. He battled substance abuse and injuries throughout his golf career, but Begay persevered in the game. He's an analyst with the Golf Channel and NBC Sports and is now back playing on the Champions Tour. Begay's also a big believer in giving back. On Tuesday, he was on the range at Canyon Meadows to give some golf tips to some Indigenous youth. But his message isn't all about golf.
It's more just sort of the telling of my story and being able to overcome the challenges in your life to pursue your dreams. I don't know what many of these kids want to do, but I know that they're facing a lot of difficulties on a day-to-day basis in their communities, and I just want to encourage them to keep the faith, work hard, and you never know what may come of it.
Begay says doing these clinics on tour stops is very rewarding.
Well, it's seeing the smile on the faces when they hit a good shot. Golf's a very difficult sport. Many of these young people have just started, and so being able to help them with one element and then see them see the success in a good shot. And any golfer out there knows it just takes one good shot to keep you coming back.
And meeting Begay was a highlight for many of these golfers.
I think it's really cool to meet someone that's also like Indigenous as well, and so like a role model like him.
And they'll definitely use his tips in the future.
I mean, he taught me, like, on my swing, it would always go left. Now it's starting to straighten out because, you know, got to hold it for 2 more inches. And so he taught me that. And, yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
He just taught me to keep my swing a little bit slower and keep it more straighter.
Begay won 4 times on the PGA Tour and would love to get that first one on the PGA Tour Champions. His game's in good shape, so you never know. It could be this week.
Yep, you never know. We're wishing you all the best there, Mr. Begay. And that's our evening national newscast for this Wednesday, August 14th. We'll be back again tomorrow for your midday newscast. Make sure to join us again. From everyone at APTN National News, Masicho, Miigwech, hi hi. Thank you for watching.